Thank you so much for coming to Session 2 of Spirit, the stimulating program initiative for retirees that inspires thought. I'm Judy Steinig, Rebbitzin of the Young Israel of Bayside, and Associate Director, Community Services of the Orthodox Union. This event is a program of the OU in conjunction with OHEL and STAJE and the Margaret Tietz Rehab Center of Center Light. We want to thank so many of you who were here last week for coming back again, and for many of you bringing friends. So we have a very nice group today, and we're pleased to have all of you. Spirit has been presented in Teaneck, New Jersey, Boynton Beach and Boca Raton, Florida, the 5 towns, and we're very happy now to be presenting it here in Central Queens. By the way, for any of you who are planning to be snowbirds this winter, with God's help, we've already heard from the places we were at last year in Boynton Beach and in Century Village, Boca Raton, and we have a one-day session scheduled there. So keep in touch if you're going to be around mid-February. I think it's like February 17th, 18th. So we'll be happy to let you know. They have not decided what topics we're presenting yet, but we're working on it. And for sure, tell all of your friends that are down there to look for the program. The OU recognizes that as the generation of baby boomers leave their professional responsibilities, they are looking for educational stimulation. The goal of this program is to provide active retirees with opportunities for spiritual and intellectual growth within their communities. We truly appreciate the hospitality of Young Israel of Hillcrest and the assistance of Rabbi Weiss, Margaret, the board, and membership for the promotion of this program. And we very much appreciate our in-house caterers, Ari and Abe Feld, who prepared a beautiful buffet for us today. OHEL Family Services has been working hard for the Jewish community throughout the New York metropolitan area. The OU has been partnering with OHEL on many levels in numerous programs. We were very thankful for last week's involvement of OHEL in Spirit. And for those who missed the program, it will soon be available online at oucommunity.org, as are all of the past Spirit programs. As I said before, we've had Spirit now for the past year, and every single one of those sessions is available at oucommunity.org. STAJE is an organization that works with retirees to bring Jewish meaning to their next stage of life. We want to welcome Rabbi Aryeh Borsuk, who's over here, who has recently joined the STAJE staff as program director. Rabbi Borsuk will be speaking with us shortly about the goals and how you can be involved in this organization. We are truly appreciative to Margaret Tietz for its generous sponsorship of this program, and are very happy to welcome Rebbitzin Sheva Turk to the program. There's the Tietz table over there. As a valuable community resource, which is so beloved here in Central Queens, I don't have to tell most of you too much about the Tietz Rehab Facility. I'm sure that most of you have had relatives or friends that have regained their strength at this amazing institution. I'd like to share my personal karasatov, my personal gratitude to the staff of Margaret Tietz for my own recovery there 6 years ago after I broke my hip. Even before its new state-of-the-art renovation, it was a superb place. I had a wonderful experience there, and I recommend it highly if that's where you have to be for a couple of weeks. It is complete with 5-star catering under the VOD of Queens. I'd also like to acknowledge the presence of Mrs. Bella Kirshner. Bella, you want to raise your hand? Who is the founder of Life Source Solutions, a free referral source for seniors and caregivers, providing customized solutions to meet life's pressing challenges. So Bella will be here throughout the program and can speak to people during the break if they have any need. I'd like to also thank the group that has been working with us on this program, Phyllis Zelkowitz and Carol Neufeld and Solon Grace Lauber, who have been really very, very instrumental in making sure that we picked out appropriate topics, to make sure that catering worked out well, and that they brought lots of friends and people to the program. So we thank them so much for their involvement. And of course, I'd like to thank Edita Schwartzbaum, who was here as you came in, my associate from the OU, who's active in all of our programming. Today's program will take a new look at legal issues that are important to consider during the retirement years, and we will be hearing from Eytan Kobre shortly. I want to thank everyone for coming, and I want you to enjoy the program and tell your friends to join us for the rest of the series. At this point, I'd like to call upon Rabbi Borsuk, who will speak a little bit about STAJE and will introduce Mr. Kobre. Thank you so much, and we will be speaking to you later.
I'd like to thank everybody for coming again for week 2, and I would like to thank Rabbi Steinig for all of her hard work making this event so successful, publicizing it. Oh, sorry. I'd like to thank everyone for coming, and I'd like to thank Rabbi Steinig for all of her work arranging all the details that went into this program. She really did a great job, and we're very appreciative. For those of you I haven't spoken to on the way in or during last week, STAJE is a relatively new organization, and our goal is to create enrichment opportunities for retirees, especially in today's day and age, as more and more people begin to retire and people are healthier for longer. There's a new opportunity for growth, and we're looking to try to capitalize on that and create unique opportunities for enrichment, whether it's in learning or in chesed, in other ways. We are exploring right now what we could do in these neighborhoods in Jamaica Estates, Hillcrest, Kew Garden Hills, Kew Gardens. If people have any thoughts or ideas, we'd love to hear. My cards and some surveys are in the corner there as you go, and I'll be here to talk and hear your feedback. We would love to work with you to do all we can. I would like to introduce Mr. Kobre. Eytan Kobre is well known to many of us from his writing in various Jewish publications, particularly Mishpacha, Queen's Jewish Link quite frequently. He's also an editor at Mishpacha. But additionally, he has practiced law and served as an associate general counsel for Agudas Yisrael of America and was a practitioner in the area of elder law. Currently, he is licensed as an insurance broker specializing in long-term care insurance, specifically for couples in their 50s and 60s, which is exactly what we're looking for today. So with that, I would like to call up Mr. Kobre.
Good afternoon. Thank you very much, Rabbi, for that introduction. And I want to thank the Orthodox Union, a wonderful organization for which I've spoken quite a number of times in related contexts. And it's always been a wonderful experience to partner with the OU in their community education. I want to thank Rabbi Steinig, whom I know for quite a while now, and we've worked together as well, and it's always great to do so. And thank the Shul, Israel Hillcrest, for hosting the event, and the sponsors for giving their support to make it happen. Today, as we all know, is Election Day. It's a day for choosing. In the Jewish tradition, we're well familiar with the idea of Aten nitzavim hayom. You are standing this day to make choices. Of course, the Torah talks about much more momentous choices than between Tweedledee and Tweedledum, perhaps on the ballot. But it's important. We all know that choices are our responsibility, our privilege, and our responsibility to be proactive about our lives and to make choices, not to sit back and let events overtake us and then regret, but rather to look at the choices that we have and to make intelligent, educated choices. And that's really what I'd like to speak about today. And truthfully, I'm probably not going to be covering anything that all of you here today have not heard about previously, but the question is whether, how many times we sometimes need to hear about things in order to be motivated and actually act on them. So the area of legal issues for people in their retirement and years just entering or well into their retirement years is, of course, it's a large area, a lot of different issues, and it's difficult in the amount of time that I have allotted to me to really cover all the bases. But I would like to just touch upon some of the couple of important salient aspects that really call for, as I say, decision-making on all of our parts. So the first area, and again, no doubt you've been to programs where this has been talked about and has been stressed, is extremely important area is that of advanced directives. And again, I'm not going to ask for a show of hands as to how many people have been to programs where advanced directives were discussed. And let me just define that term now before I go any further. Advanced directives referring to the small set of legal documents that it's really important for anyone at any age to have executed, to have filled out, and to have on file. We're talking about a healthcare proxy and a power of attorney and a will, and we'll talk more about those in a few moments. But I was going to say that I'm not going to ask for a show of hands as to how many people have been to programs at which these documents have been discussed. And I'm not going to ask for a further show of hands as to how many people actually have acted to actually have such documents completed and ready for use. And I'm not going to do that because I don't like to put people on the spot. But we all know the answer. For each of us knows the answer about our own life situation. And you know, when you say it can't be stressed enough, that's not just a trite phrase. It's the truth. It's a simple truth. It can't be stressed enough. So let's talk about these advanced directives as they're referred to. Let's talk first about the power of attorney, which is perhaps the most boring and again, essential document. There's not that much to say about it, other than it's an important document which gives the person of your choosing the ability to transact, to represent you, to transact on your behalf regarding whatever matters you want to give over to them in regard to financial and related matters, but specifically not in regard to healthcare decisions. So it can cover a very large number of things, but nothing relating to healthcare, which is covered by the healthcare proxy. And I say that it's up to you as to what they will represent you in, and that is specifically set forth on the document. It could relate to tax matters, insurance matters, banking matters, real estate matters, other business transactions, and so on. And it's important to know that a number of years ago, I believe it was in, I think it's now about 5 years, that New York State, because this is a document which is enshrined in New York State law, it's a matter of state law that recognizes the validity and the effectiveness of such documents, and New York changed the form about 5 years ago. Now, if you still have the old form, it should be effective, but if you are going to complete one now, then you should be aware that there is a new form. It's longer than the old form was. The old form was about 3 short pages. This new form is, I'd say, about 5-6 pages. It's easily accessible. It's not something that you should be paying a lot of money for. I'm quite sure that it's available on the computer. It's about 5 pages now. If not, certainly your local stationery store will carry it. You should not be paying more than a couple of dollars for it, and you should not necessarily be needing an attorney to help you complete it. You shouldn't allow an attorney to give you the idea that you absolutely must do so under the direction of an attorney and at a steep fee. It's true that it is a little more involved than it used to be. It now requires not only the signature of the principal of you, who are now designating your attorney in fact, your representative, your agent, now must be signed by the agent as well. And it must be notarized. It does not require witnesses, but it requires notarization, otherwise it's not effective. And there are a number of other details, not going to go into, the ability to appoint co-agents and so on. The one that's the standard power of attorney that's in use is what's called the durable power of attorney, which actually gives that person the ability to act on your behalf, to represent you from the moment that you sign it. Meaning even before a person is incompetent to make their own decisions in these areas, already the agent now, once you've signed the document, now has the power to represent you, and therefore it's a potent document. It's a document that carries a lot of a lot of weight, there are obvious consequences for a person to be able to act on your behalf without your knowledge. So it's important, obviously, to choose someone in whom you have complete trust. The only other thing I'll mention is that, and this is something that we encounter quite often, is the fact that you'll often go to the trouble of having completed this document, this power of attorney, and then you'll go to your local bank or your insurance company or what have you, and they'll say, I'm sorry, we can't accept this. This is, Citibank, Prudential, we've got our own form that you have to fill out. And very often this can really gum up the works and can hold up important transactions. Everything is ready. If you've lined all the ducks up, and all of a sudden you don't have power of attorney, or your child or your spouse doesn't have power of attorney for you, and everybody's there for the real estate closing, and it's it can't go forward because you don't have their power of attorney form, and they've got to get it, et cetera, et cetera. It's just important to know that this is absolutely illegal, really. It's on their part. I'll just read to you from the report of the New York State Bar Association back when they made these changes back in 2009. And they recognize that this is a problematic reality for a lot of people. And the authors here say, one of the goals of the original creation of a statutory short form was, referring to the power of attorney, was to encourage financial institutions to accept such documents. In other words, it's actually, the form itself is in the law. It's in the General Obligations Law of New York State. It sets forth the actual text of this document. And theoretically, if you had those books on hand, you could actually photocopy it out of the law. It says, but the authors say the anticipated results did not follow. Many institutions instead require that the principal execute a document prepared by the institution. The enactment of the durable power of attorney actually exacerbated the situation. If the financial institution would not accept a statutory short form durable power of attorney, and the principal had already lost capacity, was already incompetent in the hospital, or what have you, serious difficulties could ensue because the principal could not legally execute another document. And so in 1986, the law was amended to make it unlawful for a financial institution to refuse to accept a statutory short form. It's unlawful to refuse to accept it. Notwithstanding the statutory provision, financial institutions apparently continued to refuse to accept statutory short form powers of attorney, continue to demand that the institution's own form be completed. So they're just recognizing the unfortunate reality, but it's important to know that that is the case. And you should be armed with that information, if not with a copy of what I just read, when you have to go into various places and use the power of attorney. But again, extremely important. Okay, then we come to the healthcare proxy. A little more involved discussion. Very important discussion. It's interesting that the Rabbi mentioned in his introduction that I'm an editor, one of the editors at Mishpacha magazine, and I write for them regularly as well. In addition to my weekly column, I write features very often, feature articles, and the issue that will be hitting the newsstands or be in people's mailboxes tomorrow has a cover story that I wrote on the new landscape in American medicine. It's not quite so new, but it's been happening. It's been creeping up on us for a while now, but it has really, exploded into becoming a major issue for Jewish patients and their families. And it's really revolves around end-of-life issues. And when you say end-of-life issues, that means issues for people who may be at the end of their lives, but that can be quite a long period, or people who doctors and hospitals may believe to be at the end of their lives, but may not be. And that's exactly what that's all about. It's about the chasm that exists between the way Jewish tradition has always viewed life and an individual's life, and the way that the American medical establishment and the people trained in that establishment and the institutions of that establishment view things. And really what the, not to give away the entire article, but one of the points made there is that the way that medical establishment views things is a function, is a product not only of a certain philosophical worldview, whereby what determines a person's worth is simply quality of life, which is just an amorphous, subjective term, which means different things to different people. And the Jewish tradition, the Torah, certainly has its own view on what constitutes quality of life. And that's not really the topic of today's talk. I'm not going to go into that in depth, but the American medical establishment which being a product really of secular society, of Western secular society, has certain views on what constitutes quality of life, and it is on that basis that they make decisions for people, for autonomous human beings who are under their care. But it's also, the other aspect is that it's not just about philosophy, it's also about the money, which is even much more unfortunate. It's one thing if you'd say that people have a well-meaning philosophy, a certain outlook on life and on human life and so on. But when we find so many instances and so many anecdotes in which decisions are being made by hospitals and by doctors, it's based simply on their interest in getting someone out of a bed, getting someone out of the ICU, because they're not making money on that person, they're losing money on that person. And they're making the most important decisions in life and death decisions, based on simply on financial motives. And nothing can be more crass and more tragic than that. Which brings us to healthcare proxy. Until 2010, it was the case that in New York State, if a person had a healthcare proxy, which again is to healthcare decisions what a power of attorney is to financial, business, and other matters, meaning that it's giving someone, you are giving someone else the ability to make those decisions on your behalf. Although, let me point out one very important difference, which is that when it comes to healthcare proxy, that person can only make those decisions for you once you are no longer able to make the decisions. Once you're incompetent to make those decisions, as determined by a doctor, that's when the healthcare proxy takes effect. Until that point, that ability to make those decisions cannot be given over to anyone else, unlike in the case, as we discussed, of a power of attorney. Very important difference. But in any event, if a person had a healthcare proxy, fine. And we'll talk soon about the different types of such documents that there are out there. They're not all one flavor. But what if a person hadn't filled one out? And again, I'm not going to ask for a show of hands in this room as to how many of us have them and how many don't have them. But, you know, I'd venture to guess that a good number of people here today do not have these. So what is your status under New York law as it stands now? Well, until 2010, at least had some comfort, could take some comfort in the fact that New York's standard for provision of care, all sorts of care. Now we're talking about, this runs the gamut. At its most basic level, we're talking about nutrition and hydration, which simply means food and drink, basic staples of life. The person doesn't starve to death, which, again, you read my article and you see that there are people that are starving to death in hospitals. They're being starved to death in hospitals. This is not me talking, by the way. This is not rabbis with long white beards talking. This is clean-shaven physicians talking. Physicians who see this from the inside and are trying to fight, actually, their medical establishment at the risk of their own careers. By the way, just talking about rabbis with beards, it's interesting what a difference philosophy makes with respect to the actual medicine itself. Because in the course of researching this article, I spoke with some of the rabbis who are part of an effort that has been created in the last couple of years to try to deal with these issues, and they've been training rabbis to serve as intermediaries between go-betweens between family and physician, and to try to bridge the cultural gap that exists, that gap in worldview that we talked about, and also for these people to have both the halachic knowledge and the halachic expertise and basic medical knowledge to be able to intelligently serve as these go-betweens, going back and forth between rabbi, patient, and doctor. That triangle of interest that you have when a patient is in the hospital with a terminal disease or end of life. And I spoke with some of these rabbis, and they told me about cases in which, just one instance in which happened last week or 2 weeks ago. We're talking here about a Hasidic Rav in Williamsburg, who I must tell you I haven't met, but I spoke with him on the phone. He really doesn't speak a proper English, honestly. Probably, I can't imagine that, I'm not sure that he has even a high school education. But he's a brilliant young Talmid Chacham, a person who has received training in medical issues from doctors under the aegis of this initiative. And he told me about a story that happened 2 weeks ago at a leading hospital in New York, in which there was a woman who was basically, the doctor had said, the doctor had given up on this woman. And this Rav recalled reading the medical literature about a non-invasive surgical procedure that had actually been innovated over a decade ago, which he brought to the attention of this doctor. And this doctor was not competent to perform it, but she was transferred to the care of another doctor, and this procedure was performed, literally enabling this woman to leave the intensive care unit and step down, and is now on her way out of the hospital. It was a woman who had basically been consigned to just basically, as I say, making her comfortable and allowing nature to take its course, etc. And I came across a number of such instances, rabbis coming up with experimental drugs or things that, and I asked him, how is it possible that, I understand that you're familiar with this because you read the literature and you've undergone these training sessions, but how could the doctor have missed this? And he said it really comes down to the question of that philosophy determines how far you're going to go on behalf of a patient. Are you going to exert yourself and follow every last lead and rack your brains to come up with every possible procedure or new procedure that's been discussed, or and try to think whether it applies to the situation? So philosophy really makes a difference in terms of whether you're willing to go to the mat for somebody. In any event, so until 2010, it had to be clear and convincing evidence that a patient wanted, let's say, life-sustaining procedures to be withheld, nutrition, hydration to be withheld. Otherwise, if there was no healthcare proxy, these things had to be provided to a patient. But then in 2010, over the strenuous objections of Orthodox Jewish advocacy organizations, such as Agudath Israel and I believe the OU, a new law was enacted in New York State, was signed by Governor Patterson at that time. It's called the Family Healthcare Decisions Act, I believe. And basically, what that law said was that if you don't have a healthcare proxy, then the law appoints one for you. And basically, there's a list there's a hierarchy of relatives of different people. In other words, if you don't have one, then it falls to the spouse to make those decisions, not the spouse, and the children. If not the children, then the parents, and not the parents, then the adult siblings of the patient, and if not the adult siblings, then a close friend. And unfortunately, a lot of people in the Orthodox Jewish community have situations where that can lead to very unfortunate results, or can throw matters into great confusion. On the one hand, it can be a good thing because in the absence of a healthcare proxy, it's no longer left just to the doctors and the hospitals who are supposed to apply that clear and convincing standard, but may not. So now at least someone is designated, even if you haven't, taken the care to do so in your lifetime. But on the other hand, the question is, who are those people that are going to make those decisions? And many people have within their families, have those who observe Jewish law, those who don't observe, those who, there are difficult family situations, matters of divorce and estrangement, etc. And unfortunately, in a case like this, where someone who may in fact not be in sync with your beliefs, may not be in sync with your perhaps desire to follow the dictates of Jewish law, will be making those decisions, and it can create tremendous intrafamilial animosity, and a lot of difficult situations can and have arisen, and this is organizations that have dealt with many such situations. I have here there's actually a legal decision, about a 30-page legal opinion that was from back in 2005 in the Supreme Court of State of New York, the County of Queens, in which we are right now, which was exactly such a situation in which there was an elderly woman who was an Orthodox Jewish woman, and she had a daughter who was no longer observant, whom she had appointed as a healthcare proxy, but she had siblings, all of whom were observant. And the question became whether there was a fight in the family about the insertion of a peg, of a feeding tube, which is something that can prolong a person's life by years. And is a very simple surgical procedure. It's a 20-minute procedure, and and the question became, in this case, it happens, unfortunately, the patient in this case was a person with dementia, was an advanced age with dementia, and so on. But there was a fight in the family, and the decision by the judge was actually that, the siblings wanted to revoke the power of attorney that the healthcare proxy given to this non-observant daughter. But he didn't allow that, but he did say that the peg had to be inserted and nutrition and hydration did have to be provided, and he surveys what Jewish law has to say about this in terms of Jewish medical ethics, and he actually says at the bottom here, so we can say that it's a matter of law, that you've got to fill out these documents. He says, although it's too late for this woman, the best course for observant Jews wishing to prepare a healthcare proxy is to appoint a halachic authority of their choice to rule on medical issues as they arise in the event they become incapacitated. Within Orthodox Judaism, two versions of advanced directives have evolved. This is the judge speaking. While the Rabbinical Council of America, the RCA's healthcare proxy, expounds a very specific position, advises its followers to make a living will following its mandates, Agudat Israel America has its own, which gives general guidance as to what one should do. In other words, there are some slight differences between the two, but there are these two versions of what's called a halachic living will. But it's important to know that's not, the terms get very confusing in this area, because you've got something called a healthcare proxy, got something called a living will, and a halachic living will. Let me clarify for you very quickly. A living will, not a halachic living, but a living will carries no legal force whatsoever in New York State. It's simply a statement of a person's wishes for their end-of-life care from medical decisions. But it has no actual legal validity in New York State. Let's put that to the side. It's not really all that relevant. Then you've got a healthcare proxy, we've been talking about, and the halachic living will. But that latter term is really a misnomer. Halachic living will is a healthcare proxy. It's a halachic healthcare proxy. It means it's a healthcare proxy that's been adapted to address the needs of observant Jews. And there are two forms of that, as the judge stated. By the way, I'll just tell you that the judge actually is a frum Jew as well, Martin Ritholtz. He's a neighbor of mine in Bayswater. So he knows what he's talking about when he talks about halacha and so on. He's a Talmud Chacham too. But in any event, there are two forms of this, and it's important. Again, it's important to have a healthcare proxy, but it's even more important to have a halachic living will, which is a halachic healthcare proxy. So it's a healthcare proxy which basically says that I want decisions. I'm appointing. In fact, I am appointing a regular person, a non-rabbi, so to speak. There's nothing wrong with appointing a rabbi too, but probably a person would want to appoint a family member, a close friend, as their healthcare proxy, as their representative. But I am directing that person, in going about making decisions for me, should consult with Rabbi so-and-so, whose name and contact information is to be inserted into the halachic living will, the halachic healthcare proxy itself. If that rabbi is not available, another rabbi. So, extremely important. And even more important, perhaps, post-2010, when if you don't make the decision, if you don't execute a healthcare proxy, that decision will be made for you by operation of law, going down a list of relatives and then friends. And as I say, that can lead to a lot of problematic situations for a lot of people. In some cases, not. In some cases, you would appoint your spouse, and the law will now appoint your spouse. That works out fine. But for many, many people, as we've seen, that's not the case. So, healthcare proxy, extremely important, especially in today's medical environment. See my article coming to a newsstand near you tomorrow. But just to get a sense of, wherever you stand on these issues, really, it's, what I'm saying here is however you feel, and people have a lot of different personal feelings. Obviously, it's a very emotional topic. What kind of end-of-life care, what kind of care I want, if God forbid there should be a terminal illness. But however you feel, whatever you believe, one thing's for sure, you don't want the decisions being made based on dollars and cents by faceless bureaucrats sitting in a hospital somewhere, or by some wet behind the ears resident in an ICU somewhere at 2 a.m. That's the one thing you don't want. You want to have control of your own life's decisions. So again, healthcare proxy is something that you can, undoubtedly download from numerous places on the computer. But that's a standard healthcare proxy. But if you're looking for the halachic healthcare proxy, I don't have copies with me here today, but again, contact either Margaret Israel of America. Well, we should really give the OU first, because it's an OU. But I'm just, I want to give people the options. I'm sure the OU will be fine with that. They want this to be a fully informed presentation. Either contact the OU, was it 212-613? Whatever. You've got the literature right there on the table, or Agudath Israel of America, and take care of that. Really take care of that. I'm just going to wrap up. We talked about the third advance directive is often included in the threesome of advance directives is to have a will, a last will and testament. It's an important document, although I must say not nearly as important as the other two we discussed, but it is the one document which really should be created, drafted, and executed under the direction of an attorney. Even a simple will, because even simple wills are usually not all that simple. Usually there's some kind of wrinkle in them, and assuming that the attorney is not charging hefty fees, and you should be able to have the confidence that it was done properly. And again, it is an important document, but not nearly as important as the other two. It's important, again, it's a shalom bayis document in some senses to assure that, intra-family squabbles after one's passing, that everything has been disposed of in accordance with one's wishes. Sometimes it's absolutely essential to have one if a person has assets in different states, and if different states have different probate laws, etc., and other reasons why it is important to have a will. Also to provide for minor children, if that's a relevant consideration. You can put trusts in wills, and so on. When I used to do presentations of this sort, I used to talk a lot about Medicaid law. Used to talk a lot about Medicaid law. And just about, in general, how to finance long-term care. I don't do that anymore. I say I don't talk about that in presentations because, and one of the reasons I don't talk about that anymore has to do with the very day on which we are here, gathered here together, which is Election Day. And what I mean by that is that, as the Rabbi mentioned in his introduction, I practiced elder law, which included Medicaid planning for individuals, retired individuals very often. I did that for a number of years. I really came to see the shortcomings of that. Obviously, some people, that is the route to go. But it's important to understand that Medicaid planning as a way of paying for the eventuality, and maybe that's too strong a word, but only slightly too strong. Not the possibility of needing long-term care, but not quite the eventuality, because I can't say it's 100% definite that one will need it, but unfortunately the statistics are very high in terms of people over the age of 65 in terms of their needing some form of long-term care, whether at home, in a assisted living facility, in a nursing facility. So it's important to understand that I came to see that Medicaid planning really is it's a government benefit program for low-income individuals, which has been jerry-rigged by elder law attorneys like myself. Well, I didn't do the rigging, but I used the system. But it's been jerry-rigged to address the needs of middle-class people. And when you jerry-rig a program, inevitably there are going to be a lot of problems come up, and you have to try to fit yourself into a program that's not designed for you. So there are a lot of problems with using Medicaid to finance long-term care. And one of the biggest problems, as I said, relates to this very day, Election Day. And that is that, after all, it's a government benefit program. And anyone who reads the papers knows that the #1 budget item of governments at every level, and federal and state and city and county, that is busting their budgets, that is turning governments bankrupt, state, city, federal governments bankrupt, is Medicaid. That is the biggest hot potato that we have in America today. And it's completely subject and dependent on the vagaries of politics. So today they're predicting some sort of Republican wave. We'll see in a few hours from now whether that materializes. But we know that Medicaid obviously is a big issue of contention. It's a huge political football between the Republicans and the Democrats, between conservatives and liberals, et cetera, et cetera. If a person is planning their long-term care needs, hopefully not for now, but for 5 years, 10 years, 15 years, 20, 25 years, hopefully, as Hashem, never have to need long-term care in any setting. But if one's going to need it, one wants to be able to have the confidence and be able to sleep well at night knowing that those needs have been addressed. And if that's the case, a program like this, which has brought such problems to America's economy, and which is so completely subject to, as I say, the vagaries of politics, is a very slender reed on which to base your future planning. And because of that, there are really, as I always say, 3 ways to finance your long-term care needs. One is Medicaid, as we discussed. You can tell I'm not that high on Medicaid, although I did that planning for people for many years. The second is to pay out of pocket. Well, check out what the costs are. We're talking about a month in a New York area nursing home. And although I must say that people have the mistaken impression, as about many things, that that most long-term care is received in nursing homes. That's not the case. It hasn't never. I don't know if it was the case at one point, but more and more so, it's being delivered to people in the comfort of their own homes, surrounded by family, etc. But in any event, a month in a New York area nursing home of mediocre quality, not the Rolls-Royce of nursing homes, is now averaging over $9,000 a month. Closer to $10,000. So we're talking about $120,000, $130,000 a year long-term care costs. So the second way to pay for it is out of pocket. The third way is long-term care insurance, which, again, as the Rabbi in his introduction mentioned, is what I segued into from doing Medicaid planning for people, segued into long-term care insurance. I've run out of time, but again, that's an area that people should explore, and I'm certainly happy to explore that with you, as are other people who specialize in that area. But it is important to speak with someone who does specialize in the area, not someone who does it as an afterthought. I want to thank you all for listening to the presentation today, and I want to just again encourage you and urge you really to use this as election day and make choices, be proactive, and act on the information that I've shared with you today. Thank you.
Okay, we'll be taking a short break. If there are questions, we can answer them now, or others can take a break. Okay? Are there any questions you'd like to ask, Mr. Kobre?
Yeah.
Wait, maybe you want to stand up, speak loudly?
Is the bank's power of attorney the same as a lawyer's attorney's power of attorney? Is it the same?
Often it is, but I can't speak for all banks. You know,
Or if you have one from the bank, you should still have one from the attorney?
not from an attorney. From, as I say, you don't need an attorney for this. You go online and you'll find you should. You know what? Go to the New York State Bar Association website, nysba.org probably, and download a healthcare. I'm sorry, we're talking about a power of attorney. I'm sorry. You should be able to find powers of attorney online as well. If not, as I say, your local stationery store. But yes, the answer is it's worthwhile because you can never know what in a particular bank, what sort of form they have. You should have the form as it is set forth in the statute.
It won't conflict though, because I have one from the bank, but it won't conflict with you.
Well, again, I mean, it will override. Yeah, it will override. You can't have, again, if they are the same, then you're fine. If they're not the same, then the one that's executed last will override the one that's executed earlier. But then again, that's the one that you should be using, if in fact they conflict. So yeah, I mean, it's, sure. Yes?
Person has a will, is it important to also have a trust fund?
Okay, I mean, yes. Is there a need for a trust in addition to a will? Well, first of all, we have to define what we mean when we say trust. You know, there are people out there who market living trust, what they call living trusts, and they will tout the benefits of a living trust and so on. I actually wanted to mention in this connection. I'm not sure if I have. I put out some articles that I wrote. They're back there on the right in the back there. I just want to caution you about them, that they were written quite a number of years ago, and the law may very well have changed in regard to some aspects, and therefore they're not at all to be taken as any sort of legal advice, or not just legal advice, but even just advice, period. They're there simply to alert you to issues and to seek advice with regard to them. But I mention that because I'm not sure if one of the pieces there, I know I wrote a piece once about wills versus living trusts and so on. And it's a longer discussion. So the answer is that very often living trusts have their purposes. It should be explored. But then there are other types of trusts. Trusts are a very important tool in Medicaid planning, as we talked about. When a person is trying to set him or herself up, to be eligible for Medicaid, to pay for long-term care, so a very common tool that's used is a trust, a Medicaid trust. In that context, it's an essential tool. It's a very important tool. So, my short, long answer to you is it really depends on the type of trust we're talking about and on the person's particular situation. Trust can be an important tool, yes. But beware of people who are looking to sell you trust. If you already got a will and someone's trying to sell you a living trust, then it's important to really get a second opinion on whether that's in fact necessary.
There's a question over here. Over here.
Yes. Yes. Yes.
Who makes the ultimate decision? I mean, you could have a living will, you're not for suffering.
So did you have a question? I'm sorry. That, yeah, yeah. Okay, thank you. Yes.
We have a will that wrote like years ago when we had your kids. Obviously, married.
Yes.
So we need to do it.
Update it. To update it. Yeah, that's, I mean, is there a need to review a will that you executed years ago to see if it needs updating? Is that the question, essentially? Yeah, thank you for bringing up that point. That's a very important point. The fact is life circumstances do change. And, your choices about how you want things to proceed, after 120 may change as well along with those circumstances. So it is important every number of years, every so often, to pull out your wills and to review them and, and if necessary to update them. Basically, you can revoke the previous will, you can add what's called a codicil, and that is definitely important. Okay. Sorry.
Thank you very much, Mr. Kobre. If anyone has any further questions or would like to get in touch with Eytan Kobre, feel free to email me at the OU, and I'll be happy to give Mr. Kobre's contact info. Before we take a break for a few minutes, I just want to comment further in the brochures in the back, the OU Community Engagement Programs for Your Community. There is a page that talks about the halachic living will that the OU has available, so please feel free to look at that, or you can contact us further for the OU's information on that. We'll be giving out evaluation forms. It is very important that everybody here, husbands and wives, both fill out evaluations. It's the only way that we can improve our programs. Let us know what you thought of our speakers today, what other programs you're interested in, what you think needs to be tweaked. We can't help you unless you help us. I'd like to also announce that Margaret Tietz tomorrow is doing a program called Managing Transitions Late in Life, a symposium for providers and caregivers. November 5th, that's tomorrow, 11 to 1, at the Margaret Tietz Nursing and Rehabilitation Center. For further questions, Sheva Turk will be happy to answer that. Two more commercials. One is that Congregation Eitz Chaim, one of our OU shuls, is doing a complete medical system program. We have flyers on the table that give you the whole schedule. The next program they have is Tuesday, November 11th. It's free to the public, and it's ways to manage high blood pressure. Next week, I'm going to give you a little heads up. We have flyers on our table. But in addition to our program next week, we have somebody coming from the Hebrew Free Loan Society to talk about baby boomers, make your business idea a reality. There's a new initiative that Hebrew Free Loan Society is involved with, and they will be coming during our break tomorrow to share next week. So if you want to get a heads up and learn about the program, the flyers are on the OU's table. So we're going to take a little bit of a break, and we'd like to start back at 2 o'clock. There's refreshments, there's dessert in the back, so please feel free to avail yourself. Welcome back to the second part of our program. It is really a pleasure and an honor to call upon our next speaker. Rabbi Moshe Faskowitz is not just the Rosh Yeshiva of Madrigas HaAdam. He's also, of course, the Marad Asra of the Torah Center. But in our family, in the Steinig family, he's basically known as Ari's Rebbe. My son Ari has been a Talmud of Rabbi Faskowitz's for many, many years, and we are just thrilled with everything he's learned in Yeshiva Madrigas HaAdam and all the skills that he's received there. And when he found out that his Rebbe was coming here, he would have taken off from school, but we said that that wasn't a good idea. He'll see it when it's online. So it is our pleasure and our honor to call upon Rabbi Faskowitz to address us.
Good afternoon to all of you. First of all, let me say this. This is a wonderful, wonderful day. and today is actually Yontif. If you wonder, I'm actually dressed in my Yontif garb. This is not what I wear during the week. This is my Shabbos and Yontif garb. The reason I wear this today is because I get a mazel tov. My son had a baby boy. Today was the bris, and I was sandik. And as you know, sandik is a yontif the whole day. So in that spirit, I stand before you and accept that blessing from all of you and give you a blessing. It says that the sandik, on the day that he has that tremendous chus, you should go to the sandik for a bracha. And the bracha I give you is because we're talking in a form that I'm speaking about the Torah perspective on halachas for elderly, so I give you the bracha for very, very long and healthy years. Amir Hashem, we will enjoy many, many simchas and together. My intention, given that I was told it's a halachic perspective, I'm not here to inform you or to give you any halachic decisions or even advice, but it's more to alert you to a lot of the halachic considerations that you have to, that we have to have as we get older. Many of the things that I will say to you will not appeal to you. You won't like them. You won't like them. But I want to remind you that, see, I don't make the rules. I just read them. So you cannot blame me. But I think that it is important because we are observant and Torah observant people. We have a real interest to know what are the expectations. What are the expectations that Torah Seinu HaKadoshah has of us? And then, once we know these expectations, how do we make adjustments to the lifestyle or the standards of Torah observance that we've accepted upon ourselves? I will go from the easier ones to the more difficult ones. I will not talk about money in the very beginning, because what most of course are concerned is the future and money in the future. I know, we'll get to that too. But I will begin, I say, with something that is really of I would say, minor interest to you. That's kibbud av v'em, or kibbud of grandparents. That's interesting. As you get older, what is the role that you have as a grandparent with regard to your children and grandchildren? What are your expectations as a grandmother, as a grandfather? I say to all of us, and I will take questions. What do you expect from a child when you get older? What are your expectations from a child? Then the child, who has been a very, perhaps even a good son or a good daughter, what happens as they get older? As the parents get older, do their obligations increase or diminish, given the fact that they have a life too? Right? They have a life too. They have their own children. They have their own families. They have their own happy moments and tsuris and issues to deal with. Can they be bothered with an old father or an old mother? Or should the old father and the old mother, should we be a priority? And we say to them, no, you have it wrong. Number one is me. Number two, your children, your family. What does the Torah say? That's, I think, something that we really would want to know. So I begin with the words of the Aruch HaShulchan, and he wrote this about 120 years ago, V'da. He says, in Europe, I guess things were a little different then than they were here, than they are here. V'da, d'yesh kama sha'av zoken ubno. There are cases where you have an old father, that's his situation, and the son, he says, you know what, my father can't live alone, I'll take him to my house. Al shulchanai, and he will eat at my table. And now the question is, who sits at the head of the table? Does the old father sit at the head of the table? Or and that's his question, does the son sit at the head of the table? What do you think? You say the father should sit at the head of the balabayas. Anybody have any other idea? The grandfather? The great-grandfather, okay. A great-grandfather too? Who should sit? That's the question. Says the Aruch HaShulchan. He says, V'ha'av yoshev b'tzad, and the son sits just like he did at the head of the table, and the father will sit at the side of the table. Ve'ena av makpid, because a good father doesn't mind. A good father says, I want my son to take his appropriate place at the head of the table. And he says, besides that, who sits next to the father at the table? The wife. It doesn't look nice, he says, the father-in-law sits here, the daughter-in-law sits here, and the son sits here. He shouldn't be sitting next to his daughter-in-law. The husband should be sitting next to the daughter-in-law. This is what the Aruch HaShulchan writes. However, that's only with regard, he says, to seating. But in everything else, he says, the family better know something. You know who's the boss? The grandfather. Grandfather goes first. He washes first. He gets served first. He gets honored first. The grandchildren give everything to the grandfather. Seating, that's a different issue because the father sits at the head of the table. Like you said before, he's balabas. The balabas sits at the head of the table. But in no way, shape, or form does that abrogate or diminish the din of kibbut av ve'em for an old grandfather, just because he's sitting at the side of the table. And by the way, and let's say somebody has to serve that grandfather. He needs a glass of water. And he's sitting at the table, and he says, you know what, Kinderlach, I'm thirsty. Who's going to bring him a glass of water? Now, I have Kedai Nahara, a slew of Einiklach Kain Yirbu. And when I say I want a glass of water, they jump up like electricity. But I tell them, sit down, everybody. I have a son. And when I say I want a glass of water, you know who's going to bring me that glass of water? My son. And that's a Gemara. The Gemara says that. It was Rabbi Yossi, and Rabbi Yossi had 5 sons, and the Gemara says they all had smicha. So they were all big rabbonim. And they were sitting at the table one day, and the old father, Rabbi Yossi's father, came knocking at the door. And Rabbi Yossi heard, so they all jumped up to go, and Rabbi Yossi said, no, it's my father. I go answer the door. He had a whole bunch of children who say, Papa, sit down, take it easy. No. For my father, I don't take it easy. I go, so there you have some interesting guidelines that there's an intense rule, and this is the simple stuff of kibbut av ve'em when there's a grandfather or a grandmother in the house. Now, when you have this kind of a situation, is the same rule applied to a grandson? Let's take a grandson from a daughter and a grandson from a son. Who do you like better? Your grandchildren from your daughter or your grandchildren from your sons? Who do you like better? Don't tell me there's no difference. I have them too. I love them all. I say we love them all. But generally speaking, I'm speaking in generalities, and I tell you, you don't have to like everything I say, but I don't make it up. I just read it. There is a difference between the grandchildren of a father and the maternal, in other words, maternal or paternal. There's a very big difference. The difference is like this. Generally speaking, a grandparent feels more comfortable with the daughter's children. You don't want to start up with the daughter-in-law. It's hard. You don't want to start up. Daughter-in-law doesn't like what you said to the child. You're going it's a testy situation. Generally speaking, we feel, I'm not saying always, but generally speaking, we feel more comfortable with a daughter's children. However, in the halacha, and I tell you, as you get older, which you are, and you have grandchildren, please God, they should be healthy and close to you, and bear in mind, and should be a consideration, that the grandchildren of your son have a much greater obligation to you than do the grandchildren of the daughter. Because the grandchildren of the son, you've heard the expression, B'nai Bonim Harei Heim Kebanim, the children of Banim are like Banim, are like sons themselves. That halacha, that the children of Banim are like children themselves, is only referring to the children of a son. They have the same rule as the son. they have to give the grandfather the same kavod. In fact, there is a Rashi in Chumash. Rashi in Chumash says that when Yaakov Avinu, he brought karbanos, so he brought karbanos lelokei aviv Yitzchak velelokei aviv Avraham. Who did it say first, Avraham or Yitzchak? It says first lelokei aviv Yitzchak, then Avraham. And Rashi says, wait a minute, but wasn't Avraham before Yitzchak? He says, no. Here he had in consideration, he mentioned his father first and then his grandfather. You know why? Because he says, you see from here that the kavod that I have for a father has to be more than the kavod I have for a grandfather. So it works, that's another consideration, that a child, if a grandfather needs something or a father needs something, that child has to respond, according to Rashi, to the father before the grandfather. The father himself, who does he have to respond to? To the grandfather. All of these rules, though, apply. Shouldn't get complicated. They apply, though, to the son of a boy. The son of a daughter, that's a different relationship. In that relationship, in regard to obligations, chiyuvim is much less. They don't have that responsibility. And if it's a question of who has to take care of Zaidi or Bubby, you should know it's always the son's children who have a greater obligation than the daughter's children. I'm not giving you cases or practical application, but know that this does come into play. It does come into to thought how these things work out. I saw another tshuva, though, when my grandfather died. My grandmother was alone. And what do you do when you have a mother who's all alone, but you have children around? So what do we generally do to the old grandmother? My grandmother was actually in her 90s when her husband passed away. So what do I do with my grandmother in her 90s? So we said the Eineklach, we took the Eineklach, and they said we're going to have like a revolving group of us, and we'll sleep, in Bubby's house. She shouldn't be alone. We found out that Moshe Feinstein writes about that, and he says, you know what, we have a little bit of a problem, and this is what I want to tell some of you men and women as you get older. There's a problem with yichud. Does everybody, I don't have to explain what yichud is. Are you familiar with yichud? A man and woman who are not married can't be alone. Now, we do know there's halachas with a grandmother. You're going to ask me yichud with a grandmother? Right? Because a grandmother can kiss a grandson, You can't, for example, I read the Rambam, you play with it as you want. Rambam, we all know, and this is in families creates a lot of tension, but brothers are not supposed to kiss sisters, according to the Rambam. You can't kiss an aunt, she's an erva. Rambam's halachas, we know dinim. Again, you have to decide how you embrace the rules, but you're familiar with the talk. This is the talk. But a grandmother and a grandson, they're okay. They can kiss each other. I saw, and I digress for a moment, Rabbi Moshe Feinstein had a very interesting tshuva where there was an old grandfather, and he was a real learned rabbi, and his grandson became a chassan, and he loved the kala. My favorite of all the kalas, and he told her that, I love you, you're the cutest and the nicest, and I like you the best, and you know what, but I'm a rabbi and old, I can't kiss you, but under the chuppah, I'm going to give you a kiss. I'm going to kiss you under the chuppah. You know what the girl did? She was a very, to me, mystic girl, a seminary girl. She didn't know. She went to the Rabbi. And she wrote to Moshe Feinstein, and she says, what am I supposed to do? I like him very much, but should I tell him that he's not allowed to? I'll be under the chuppah, I'm an Eishes Ish. And I don't care if he's 100 years old. You can't kiss an Eishes Ish. And Rav Moshe Feinstein says, I don't believe the story. Because I know that rabbi, and that rabbi is pious and devout. He would never do such a thing. But he goes on to write that it is inappropriate. Now, what he did, I don't know. And what he will do, or you people will do, it's your life. You play with it as you want. I'm just giving you familiarity with what's the talk and the Torah's rules and regulations. Some of them, so you think, what's he talking about? We're older, who cares? You don't realize how beautiful you all are. You don't realize how beautiful and attractive every one of you is. That's the problem. That's the problem. We don't perceive ourselves as, you know what? My father told me a lovely story. There was a rabbi, there was a famous writer in pre-war Europe. His name was Pushkin. I don't know if that reminds anybody. He wrote the first Mishnayos. Now we have Art Scroll and all the Mishnayos with interpretations. He wrote the first one that had a Tietz. And the Tietz interpretation was in Yiddish. Pushkin, you remember? You own it. You still have it. It's a beautiful work. Now, Pushkin, by the way, was a very learned man, but you know what he was by profession? A journalist. He was a journalist, and he wrote for the Warsawer Welt. He was a Jewish writer, and that was his profession. And he once traveled to Eretz Yisrael for a few months to write about Baratzedo HaKadosh. This is in the early 30s. What does Eretz Yisrael look like today? And one of his missions was to go to Tel Aviv and to interview a 92-year-old rabbiste. Her husband was the Rebbe in Tel Aviv for many years. He had just passed away a few years before, and they were so enamored with the Rebbe and the Rebbitzin that they said, we don't want a new Rebbe. The Rebbitzin will go on to lead the Kehillah. And this rabbiste was a dignified, regal woman. And here he comes to interview her, and the shamus brings her in, and he sits down, and he takes out his pad, and Pushkin wants to talk to her. And she says to him, "Entschuldigt a minute." She says, "Excuse me a minute. Could you get up, please, and open the door?" So Pushkin goes, he opens the door, and then he sits down, and he says, "Choshev Rabbiste, let me ask you a question. You opened the door, you want me because of Yichud, right? Because of Yichud. Tell me the truth. Are you afraid of me?" So she looked at him, she says, Of you, I'm not afraid. You know who I'm afraid? I'm afraid of the Tanaim and Amoraim that made the rules of Yichud thousands of years ago. From them I'm afraid. And if there's a rule, and if there's a din, and if there's a halacha, I'm afraid of the halacha. So I say to you that sometimes that's a thing as we get older, and I say we, not the royal we, I truly being inclusive. As we get older, I think we're not as conscious of those ideas that yichud is prohibited, and the relationship between men and women and interaction, and those didim about touching and kissing and embracing, and that's why Rabbi Feinstein wrote these tshuvas. We need direction. And one of the things that really is sometimes upsetting, just because we're old doesn't mean that halachas don't apply to us. We are human beings too. And getting old doesn't relegate us to some kind of never land where considerations that are real and considerations that are true Torah shouldn't apply to us. So that's how he brings it. Getting back to what I was saying, with my grandmother, Moshe Feinstein writes a very interesting tshuva, where before I told you that the obligation of a son is more, and the son of a son is more to the grandmother than the son of a daughter. In this case, Moshe Feinstein said, it was my maternal grandmother, I am allowed to sleep in the house and be there with yichud, and whereas my other cousins, who were, as I said before, b'nei banim areim kebanim, from a son, their paternal grandchildren, they should not sleep with the grandmother. And he writes in his sefer a very interesting svara. He says, understanding the rules of yichud, the way he does, he said, because generally the grandmother looks like the mother. So therefore the son of a mother doesn't have that challenge of yichud, where the son of a father, according to the Chazal, his mother is the daughter-in-law, doesn't have the same features as the mother, as the bubby. Therefore, we do institute rules of yichud. Now, you know what? You may feel that this is a little extreme, or this, you know what? We ask. That's why these rules were made. These laws were made for us to ask shilas, and we have to know whose opinion do we want to follow. Or, in my example, was not that I was so religious. You see, that was the problem. The problem was, if it was up to me, at that time I couldn't care less. But it was up to the old woman, the grandmother whom I loved so dearly. And she was like the Rabbista, and she says, I spent my whole life following the rules. I want to follow them now too. So sometimes it's not about the young man making the decision, what does he want to embrace? It's about the respect for the older person and what decisions do they want to make. So these are the easier halachas that I bring, talking about kibbud av v'em, those kind of things. You know, there are other things that I don't want to get to. Is a grandfather obligated to help the children pay for tuitions in yeshiva? How about that? Is there an obligation? You know, the Rambam says that if the father can't afford it, then the grandfather is a father. He has to. If he has it, he has to give that money. Well, you know what? When it comes, like I said before, when it comes to money, the whole terrain and everything changes. I understand, but I'm just giving you some. There you have a guideline that may be very difficult to accept. However, Rabbi Akiva writes that there was a case where the father was in the army, and a baby boy was born, and the Bezdin came, and they said, "Well, we're going to make the bris for the child." And because they wanted to make the bris for the child, they said, and the holy rabbi is going to be the sandik. The old Zayda came and he said, whoa, what do you mean the rabbi is going to be sandik? I'm the grandfather. They said, yeah, but the rabbi is holy. He says, the rabbi may be holy, but who pays tuition? Rabbi Akiva said that since he pays tuition, whoever pays tuition, he's the boss. And guess what? Rabbi Akiva writes that they gave the grandfather the sandik. So with every obligation, there comes, of course, on the flip side, there's a advantage too, and it's about relationships. But these are things that they change as we get older. We either we discard them completely or we wonder about them more. I'm more concerned with the ideas: who's going to take care of us? Now, I don't know what you heard in the other talk. It's probably more of the legalese, and that's what we call halacha l'maisa, things you have to know. But there are times that there's contention, and it's not easy to take care of an older person. What happens like this, you know? I think the rules are that in order to be qualified for government assistance, you basically have to have no money. You have to distribute everything that you have first, and it's along those lines. Okay, whatever it is, whether it's Medicaid, Medicare, whether you need aid in the house. Now, the mother or father can come to the son's house, but the son says, hold on one second. Money I'm not giving you, Dad. There's no way. Because the Gemara says that kibbud av is mishel av v'lo mishel ben. I don't have to give you money. I have to give you kibbud, but let's say I buy you a sandwich, but it comes out of your bank account. That's the halacha. Children don't have to spend money on their parents. They have to give them kavod. They have to feed them. They have to cover them. They have to give them to drink. These are things that they have to physically do for them. However, the money, you take it out of the father's bank account. That's the rule. The Gemara says, im ein lo la'av, if the father doesn't have, then the son has to give him or raise money for his father. That's the rule. What if the father says like this, listen, I want you to take me in your house. I don't want to live alone. But you need an aid. Dad, you need an aid 24 hours. How much does that cost? Anybody have any idea? Give me an idea. Just give me a number. I know because I have an aid for my mother-in-law in Chicago, 24 hours, but I don't know what it is here. Maybe, let's use a number like 500. The son says, frankly speaking, I'm not paying 500 a day. 500 a day is $150,000 a year, and I have a family. I've got to take care of them. I can't do that for you. So the father says, well, you know, we'll be qualified for government assistance, but I have a problem. What's the problem? I worked hard my whole life. I just had a stroke, but I worked hard my whole life. I paid my taxes. I did everything. But what I did, I was smart. I put away money in a safety deposit box every week. And I have about $30,000, $40,000 in a safety deposit box. That's all I have. Nobody knows. Nobody knows about that. Now, we got to fill out all the papers. Now, should I tell them that I have, now, if I give this money away, I'm destitute. I have grandchildren. I love when my granddaughter comes to me and I say, Mamala, I know that the car broke down and I heard Daddy told me, here's a couple $100. Or I know that Chanala needs a dress. You know, grandparents, we love to do that. We need cash. We need money. It's not just feed us and discard us. It's not just put a cable TV in front of us and pretend we're not there. We live too. We have a life too. We don't want to be destitute. We don't want to be without anything. We don't want to become wards of the government. You want Medicaid to take over your life? You want to be left with nothing? Well, the only way you can get it is if you're left with nothing. You have to divest yourself of all your assets. Is that somewhere, am I right about that? From the previous, something like that. Isn't that true? Tell me if I'm wrong. You have to divest yourself from your assets. Now, I'm asking you this case. This is a for instance, if you will. What do? Do they report to the, would you tell this person to, well, tell the government you have the cash and they'll eat it up like the, Mr. Kobre said just now. I heard, how much is it in a nursing home for a month in New York? Well, about $10,000. So this 40 years that he worked and he saved up in the safety deposit box, Nebach schlepping to the bank every week. So now in approximately 3 months it's gone. Should he do that? Should he do that and then left with nothing? I tell you the problem with that is because he's a smart man too. He knows the grandchildren won't come. After a while they won't come. But if he knows, if the kids know that there's something there, the chances are they will come. This is written in a number of tshuvas, Chavatzel, Hashorah, and some others, that one of the reasons that, you know, it's important that the elderly hold on to assets is because children will be more willing to come if they know that the mother or the father has money. If they think you have no money, they won't be interested. You know where that comes into play? Another question. Well, I'll actually take your question in a moment, but let me see where it comes into play. What do you do when you have a number of sons and they're going to divide up the whole Yerusha? You know that. They're going to divide up the Yerusha. But you got daughters too that you love. So what do we do with them? How do we take care of the daughters? What are we supposed to do? So some of them, years ago, there was called a Ksubir Chetzi Zocher, and this goes back about 400 years ago. What they used to do is to write, when the girl got married, so the father would write in that I am committing myself to an extraordinary dowry. And the dowry was like 1,000,000 ruble. Now, you write in there that, of course, if the children will, when I pass, they'll want to divide everything equally with the girls, so then this dowry doesn't come into play. But if indeed the boys say, we're taking everything and the girls don't get, then you know what? The dowry came first. So the girls, the obligation to the girls supersedes the inheritance. So the girls will get everything and the boys will get nothing. That's how you guaranteed that the boys would be, but a lot of people say that was in those days when they used to give dowries. But today, extraordinary dowries are not, it's called asmachta. They know it's not real. So they developed other ways to guarantee that girls get their equal share. And the way they guarantee it is that, and you go to rabbis, they will write this up for you, but the way we guarantee it is the father says, you know what, I obligate myself, even today, to this daughter, I obligate myself to so much and so much money, so that in the event that when I pass, the boys don't want to share equally, so I'm allowed to obligate myself, and you signed the shtar, so my whole estate belongs to the girl already from now, before I die. It's complicated. I won't go into the details how it works halachically, but the reason we've done this is because it became abundantly clear that 2,000 years ago, we didn't see the necessity of the girls having money and the boys having money. I don't know how the economy worked. I don't know. People live from day to day. It didn't determine the family dynamic, money wasn't involved. But today, and this is what they all write, if the perception is that a particular person has no money, because the easiest way would be, give it away while you're alive. If you really want to make sure that everybody gets everything, start giving it away while you're alive. And that's in fact, a lot of lawyers will recommend that, what's the amount today? Is it $14,000? You can gift, and you start with, something that you're treading on dangerous waters, because the best of families will tell you that the Kinderlach were the best children until they came to Geld and it came to money and everybody started dividing. And somehow the color green has a bad effect on people. I don't know what it is. It must be the color green. But whatever it is, it tears families apart. But what the people in the Piskei Halachos wrote, and this I thought was very important, was what it does more than anything else, it rips the very coveted ab and aim out of the family, because the second generation, third generation, if they have that perception that there's nothing there anymore, then it's not. Now, I'm saying it's always like that. Please God, by all of you, it should not be like that. That your children have no consideration of economics when it comes to their relationship with you. But practically speaking, this is what the Mora Halacha were afraid of, that we don't want people giving everything away. Don't give it away when you're alive. Make sure you have money, because if you don't have money and you're destitute and you're all alone, it's going to come back to bite you. And that's why I'm come back to the question, what am I going to tell this lady? She says to the husband, to the son, go to the rabbi. You're telling me I should go to the government now and apply for Medicaid, have full-time help, but I should give away that $30,000, or should I lie? What will you say? Maybe I should lie. Don't tell the government. Can you lie? Are you allowed to lie? Can't lie. But people make all kinds of ruses today, to avoid, and I'm not. Now, let me make this very clear. I don't want anybody to walk away from this speech and say, that was a sleazy presentation because the suggestion was made that you could lie. I would say this, don't come to Rabbi Faskowitz to ask this question. Because if you come to me, I will tell you that you cannot say a lie, you cannot, if you come to a stop sign at the corner, you got to come to a full stop. If you don't come to a full stop, you go right through the stop sign, I hold you should get arrested. I believe that the government says you pay the taxes, you got to pay every penny to the taxes. You don't even take advantage of the loopholes that you have. You're not allowed to lie in any way, shape, or form, or sign a document, or pretend a firm. Anything you do has to be 1,000%. In fact, I stood here in the Young Israel a few years ago, and I said that very boldly, and I say it with reverence, that though you find in the Gemara many times, and I would never argue with the Gemara says you're allowed to tell a white lie, let's say for Shalom Bayis, for something like that, of that nature. And there's many cases the Gemara says a Talmud Chacham can lie for Masechta, Purya, V'Yishpiza. Those are three things where if somebody asks you, did you finish the whole Gemara? You're allowed to say no, to be humble, because you don't want to be arrogant. Or they ask you, did you sleep on this and this bed? And it's an inappropriate question. Let's just say, not sneistic. You're allowed to say, no, I didn't sleep on that bed. And the other is a Shpiza, where somebody comes to you and he says, where's the best place to eat in this neighborhood? Who's the best machnis orach? So if I'm going to say that person, the next thing you know, 100 people are going to descend on his house and they're going to take everything from him. So you're allowed to say, I'm not sure, they're all good. Well, I said, those are some of the examples. I said I say this with reverence, they're suspended. No longer in this generation can you say any lie. No lies. Because this is the most corrupt, lie-filled generation in the history of the world. And the Gemara says, Divrei Torah tzrich and chizuk, and every single thing that passes the mouth of people today is sheker, unless they're virtuous people. The lying has become so vile and vulgar that it's ripped apart the whole fabric of civilization. That's how bad lying is. You can't trust anybody, you can't trust anything. And when it gets this bad, I want to tell you, you think that you should say for Shalom Bayis. Somebody says Shalom Bayis. Yeah, guy gets married, and 3 months after he's married, his wife says, you went to Ma'ariv, how come you came back 10 minutes late? Ma'ariv took a little bit longer. Didn't take a little bit longer. He went out with his friends. He was outside smoking a cigarette. He doesn't want her to know she smokes a cigarette. But he doesn't want to tell her because, how will she feel? So he doesn't say anything. He's silly. He doesn't know she smells it on his breath, but he's super silly anyways. The next time, a week later, he comes back from Ma'ariv. It's 15 minutes late. She said, Ma'ariv, it took a little longer. Why take a little longer? Because I was talking and learning with somebody when I left Ma'ariv. Oh, okay. And then 4, 5 weeks later, again, he's 15, 20 minutes. This time, 20 minutes late. What was it? The truth is, they went for a little ride. They went to the coffee shop. He had a little coffee. That's why he's a half hour late. But each time he tells her it was in shul. That's why, for Shalom Bayis. Let me ask you something. If you asked the wife the first time, would she rather he be honest or tell a lie? If she found out that he said those 3 times, 4 times, 5, will she trust him? You lose the whole trust. A white lie means once in a lifetime if you say a white lie. Perhaps it's acceptable. But people get this idea you can just throw around white lies all day. You become a liar. You become a sheker. Your wife has no trust in you. You have no trust in her. You can't have this is a world of sheker. That's why I say today, everything changed. You can't say a lie. Go lose the money. But I'm the wrong guy to ask. That's what I say. So don't come to me to ask this kind of question. You don't want to ask me. But you want to ask other Rabbanim. I'm not so sure that I could tell this woman or this man, tell the government, take that money, you become, it's in this safety deposit box. And I don't know that I could say that. I had a shot. How much more we got? 5 minutes? You got it. I'll take some questions, in fact, soon. There's so many more topics I wanted to touch upon. But this is the ruse, that's one. Where and when can we start kvetching a little bit with the Medicaid, with the Medicare, and you fill out documents? Hey, we've all been there. We've all been there. I prepared a whole bunch of stories about where and when you could say, this one holds, you could say this sheker, this one holds, you can adjust it this way. You got to figure it out. But these are halachas. As we get older, they become more and more critical. It's a whole life. But certainly as we get older and get into those arenas, you'll find that you'll be challenged. You're going to be challenged big time. Big time. Not with small commitments, but with very, very big commitments. I had a question like this, I'll tell you very quickly. I got a call on the telephone one day. I'm going to change the name to protect myself. I get a call on the telephone one day, and this person says, hello, I'd like to know, are you Moshe Faskowitz? I say, yes. He says, do you have a relative, and they gave me a name, let's say from Texas, Lubbock, Texas. I say, it's somewhere around there, by the way, some remote place that you never heard of. And I say, well, I don't know. Why are you asking? Well, I'm calling from the government, and this person passed away, and there's no next of kin. And the law in the state that we are is that you have to go on the Social Security roster in the United States, go back 2 names, and ask the 2 people in front if they're related. Well, you're the first name, and we want to. So I say, listen, tell me the truth. Did he leave over an estate? So the woman says to me, I can't tell you. I'm not supposed to tell you. I say, listen, lady, I have a lot of tsuras in my life. I don't need more tsuras than I'm going to tell you this is my relative, and next thing I know, I'm going to have 20 debtors, all running after me, and they're trying. Could you just tell me, is it worth my while? So she says to me, you know what? Fair enough. She says, I guarantee you it's worth your while. So I said, oh, okay. I said, I want you to know that's my favorite cousin. My favorite cousin. And I said, I'll figure it out later in the meantime. Okay, so when I go then to Reb David Feinstein, and I asked Reb David Feinstein, what do I do? I said, I have a problem over here. Here there's no next of kin. The government is poised and ready to take it. And indeed, it turns out there was no next of kin. And I'm Jewish, and that person is Jewish. So we know that somewhere down the line I am related. I am a a cousin that's every Yid is related. What should I do? Should I tell them I don't know the person and then they just take it? Or should I say I'm a relative and let it be their burden? So he mentioned something. I'm not going to tell you what I did, but he mentioned to me there is a Gemara, Chas HaKadosh Baruch Hu al Memonim Shel Yisrael, that when there's Yiddish geld, the Torah doesn't want that the Yiddish geld should be snatched away and taken and thrown away. And don't abandon it. Pursue it. Find out. Maybe you even if you don't think you're related, but at least pursue it. And let's see what turns out. It turns out that person had a great-grandfather, and I had a great-grandfather that came from the same city in Poland, and they were buried in the same cemetery. So the decision of the courts was that was enough information to make me the relative. It was very, very interesting. What happened was it was contested by the prosecutor in that state. For whatever reason, I think it was pure anti-Semitism. And when I took the case all the way to its conclusion, and I want you to know there was no money involved at the end because the lawyers cost a lot of money, obviously, but I pursued it for that reason. And you know what the end of the case was? That the state said that I didn't produce enough evidence. And the bottom line of defense was, you want the evidence? You go to Auschwitz and you sift through the ashes in Auschwitz. And if you could find the remains of the documents that my great-grandparents and grandparents brought with them when they went on the trains and they went on the then you'll get the evidence that you need, the authorization and authenticity. And you could Google it, but I don't want. It's online that there is a caveat in the state law that. Well, actually, it's the state of Florida. You could find that Holocaust survivors are not subject to the same degree of establishing kinship as are other people. Yeah, so, but what's the point I wanted to make? I had a tremendous dilemma at that point in my life. I did not lie. I would not lie. And in the end, I didn't receive, thank God I didn't receive anything. If it would have been deceptive. But there a person can be challenged. You feel a challenge. Well, am I doing the right thing or am I doing the wrong thing? You have to know, where do I draw the line? And with this I will conclude one last story, and this was a hard one. Shortly after I became a rabbi, a woman called me up that her husband is in the hospital and he had a stroke and he was in his 90s. He's not going to survive. They put him on a respirator. This is 1986. And I visited her in it's in Canarsie in Brooklyn, in the Glenwood houses. It was much like the Pomanac in the good days when it was very classy and it was very fine. And she was living there alone. And she said to me, listen, Rabbi, I want to disconnect the respirator because he can't make it. I said, I'm a new rabbi. I don't think you're allowed to. So I called up Reb Reuven Feinstein. And Reb Reuven Feinstein told me at the time, no, you cannot disconnect. However, he won't survive. Given what you told me, you're not experienced, but I'm telling you he won't survive very long. Tell her she won't have to go through the agony. I came back, I told her. She says, you don't get it, Rabbi. You don't get it. I'm sitting here alone. She was an invalid. I'm here alone. I have some money. I could pay for this apartment. If I have to keep him on the respirator, a lot of it had to come out of her pocket. And it would deplete all her funds. Then you know what? They'll take me and they'll throw me in some facility and I'll die in a few weeks. I don't want to die yet. I don't want to die. So you want to condemn me? Now, the only way that I could still maintain my life is if I tell them, and I don't understand what the economics were. This is back in 86, so everything was different. So I called up Reb Reuven again, and I said, so what do? This is terrible. Here I have a woman who's begging me, she wants to live. And I understand her. What does the Torah say? And he explained to me then, you're young, and not everything that you will present to the people will find favor in your eyes. Not always will you understand it. Many decisions will be very, very painful, especially dealing with the elderly. But there are rules and regulations. You cannot disconnect. A person cannot make they cannot leave a will saying, I want to leave my eyes or my ears to science. So you can't do that. It's not to us. Or Moshe had a tshuva here. We don't have the time to read that. But things of that nature, and writing in a will that I want things done that aren't halachically in tow with all of the great poskim that we have available to us today. What happens is, so this lady, by the way, Reuben Feinstein was right, and he did pass away the next day. But the truth was, the woman's funds, it's a real story, were depleted very quickly. They put her in a facility, and she passed very quickly. Just like she said, poor Mrs. White. I remember her well. Look, things are going to jump at us as we get older, and a lot of them are halacha things, and a lot of them have different ramifications, whether, like I said before, it seems like the yichud or the kibbud aveim. When you get into the money and you get into the issues of telling the truth, and I had other things, relationships with friends and relationships with people, we don't have the time for that. The best idea is you familiarize yourself early. So if you're familiar with it, you don't get hurt. We could deal with everything. Maybe we're older. Just because we're older, people think we can't deal with things. That's not true. We could deal with everything. You know what's hard for us to deal with? Surprises. Surprises, things we're not expecting. That's very hard. But be smart. Yes, all of the legal stuff, you got to know that. You really have to understand that and know that too. But I would tell you, go to your rabbis. Ask your rabbis to give you a broader, not just this small talk, to give you a broader understanding of the Torah perspective on getting older. And as I said when I started, I just want to give you that bracha. Today's my day for bracha, that every one of you should grow old in good health and be happy and have mazel and be able to help people rather than to need people to help you.
Thank you so much, Rabbi Faskowitz. I think we all gained a lot. Rabbi Faskowitz, Rabbi, are you around? Are you available to answer some questions? If people want to speak with him, you'll have a little bit of time. I just want to thank everyone so much for coming. I hope that you gained a lot from today. And keep in mind that this was session 2 out of a 4-week session. Next week, we're moving along yet to another synagogue. We will be Tuesday, November 11th, at Young Israel of Kew Gardens Hills, where we'll be doing hatching the nest egg, ensuring financial security throughout the retirement years with Elazar Preil. That'll be preceded by Rabbi Shlomo Hochberg, Torah Perspectives on Finances and Retirement. That's 1 week from today, Young Israel of Kew Gardens Hills. Let me remind you that if you register at the door, it is $12. In advance, it's $10. So if you only registered for today and decide you want to go to another session, please be in touch with us early. Thank you so much. Don't forget to vote. It's election day, as we've been hearing. Make sure that you make your choices and have a wonderful day.